Hello, and welcome once again to another fun-filled and definitely heretical fifth take episode of Inside the World of Mack's Headroom. Yes, this has been the fifth time I've tried to start this, primarily because I'm quite apprehensive about doing it. But, it's funny. I did a tape maybe about 6 days ago. But ever since then, I've had this sort of like what you might call writer's block or something like that. But then I realized it's not writer's block. I always got something to talk about. But the thing is, there's something I really want to talk about. And I keep saying, I better not go there. That's a really nasty place to go. Not nasty, but it's a dangerous place to go. But it's eating at me. And before I tell you what it's about, I want to say that I've probably spent more time researching this just by being so astounded by what I see in front of me on YouTube that I've spent more time observing this phenomena, than I did, say, McCamey Manor, of which I think I did 7 different half-hour or 20-minute episodes on. So I've spent more time looking at this than I did McCamey Manor, and I'm more intrigued as almost like a sociologist. I'm not a sociologist. I'm a social worker, but we use a lot of sociology in our, view of the world. And as a sociological phenomenon, I find this fascinating but incredibly dangerous. And that's why I'm nervous, really, about talking about it, because it involves, I don't even know what to call it, actually, but it's what I'm going to call, I think, the abuse of the YouTube live stream platform and comment section. Now, before I go on, I don't even know if I can repeat that. The abuse of YouTube live streaming and the comment section. There, I just did it. Now, let me make a disclaimer. There's a lot of dynamite live streams that go on YouTube. Coffee with CC is one of my favorites. I tell anybody who watches any of my million subscribers who watches my show, I'd say go watch CC. It's a great example of a live stream and a community of people that gather every morning and have fun and talk about things that are important to them. And by all means, don't think I'm talking about the other millions of live streams that go on YouTube that are illustrated by one such as Coffee with CC, because I think that's a great show and it's a lot of fun. However, I also think that there's a lot of misuses of live streaming. And, I've always had an issue with the whole YouTube platform, I guess you should say, because it seems like there's a lot of people who make a lot of money criticizing other people that are doing shows, maybe criticizing someone else who's criticizing a third person who might be criticizing who knows who. But there's an awful lot of criticism. That's what it is. And what I'm going to talk about is like criticism on steroids, like enough to almost OD you. But I'm very mortified is what I want to say. I'm scared to say any of this because what happens is, in this particular thing that I'm going to talk about, there's a lot of trolling and stuff that goes on. And so I'm real nervous. I'm a very small channel. As you all know, I tease about how many subscribers, but I think I have 110. And I have about 70 videos out, and I don't want them to get fucked with. Can you blame me? I don't want them to get fucked with. So if they do, this tape is at least a living example of the fact that what I'm talking about does happen. It does happen if I don't get screwed with anyway, but I'm concerned about it because here's what I want to talk about. People seem to use, well, first of all, let me preface it by saying something I've said a jillion times before, but I want to say it first, okay? Sigmund Freud, as much as people like to knock him around, he had a lot of smarts. And one thing he said that I'll never, ever forget is when one forgets that the human organism is a member of the mammalian species, one loses a great understanding of human nature. And what that just basically means is that if you're not civilized right or not brought up right, since we're all a member of a basically animal species, we tend to behave like animals. And maybe that's a hard pill to swallow, and a lot of humanistic psychologists would like to think we're all just creating our own reality and it's so wonderful, but I'm not one that does. So I do believe that when people are not socialized correctly, not brought up right, not exposed to abuse and neglect. And this is just my assumption, okay? No, it's not my assumption. It's based on Freudian theory, for Christ's sake. But I'm trying to say that when you're not brought up right, oftentimes you turn out not such a nice person. And it seems to me like social media and YouTube has become a certain subsystem of YouTube. I'm not saying all of YouTube, but it's a lot. Has become, how would you say, like an arena to act out these primitive aspects of the mammalian species or the human organism through social media. And it starts with what I'm just going to call criticism or ventilation of anger and hostility. And you can see that all over. I'm not so much afraid to mention a couple names because they're so plastered all over YouTube that it's no big deal. But say the phenomenon of Onision and Repsian. Okay? See, I don't think there'd be an Onision without a Repsian. And there wouldn't be a Repsian without an Onision. It's a very circular process, but what the whole thing is about is somebody becomes a target or makes himself a target for somebody on social media to vent his hostilities and make a living criticizing the hell out of somebody else, who then that encourages the person who's acting out to do more acting out in defiance of the criticizer. And that sort of escalates, and I guess social media loves it, and it's relatively harmless. I don't know about what Onision is really up to or not, and I don't really care. This isn't a tape about Onision. But that's just a real small example of how much criticism exists on YouTube. Okay, I'm getting to the point. I'm just building up a little bit, so I hope my click rate isn't too quick here. But if you take a look at those kind of shows, and there's millions of them. Everybody's taken apart and exposing. That's the new word. Oh, I'm going to expose you. In my language, that means pulling your pants down in front of somebody, but maybe this is even worse. I don't know. But everybody's exposing everybody, And I guess it's human nature. I guess it's ways that people sort of call out their hostility. There's another thing that happens also in the comment section. Now, it doesn't happen to me, but that's because I don't have enough fucking subscribers to comment much, Maybe that's good, But, I mean, if you look at the comment sections that happen in other stations where there is a lot of commentary, man, it gets hostile. And before you know it, people are just launching off into all kinds of, insane personal axes to grind over a simple subject. And then people start to get trolled. Now, everybody knows what trolling is, but I'm sure it's not fun when you're the object of it, okay? Now, that leads me into what I want to talk about. Again, I don't know what to call it. I'm just going to call it like anger channels. That's what they are. They're anger channels. They're channels that do live streaming that have a chat going on at the same time, and usually it starts by an issue. It could be an issue over somebody didn't like what somebody said on a live stream. It could be over the president-elect or not. It could be over a celebrity. It could be over anything. It doesn't really matter. But something triggers it. And then, being that some people are using live streaming as a vehicle to sort of gather a sort of collective, coalescive mentality, like a pack or something, they start to build followers. And those followers will then vent their hostility along with the live stream, and oftentimes will become a guest on the live stream against another channel who now takes an opposing position on what the original subject was. But over a period of a couple months, you start to lose the subject matter, the content of what these channels started arguing about, because now it gets real personal. And they start doing a lot of really sort of hideous things. I mean, I have to admit, just as a human being who maybe wants to vent my own hostilities in some way, I get off on watching it sometimes because it's really rather entertaining. But when you think about that, it's people's lives that are being affected. It's crazy. And a lot of people get dragged into these various channels, and I'm sure they exist in all kinds of milieus. Like, I'm sure they exist in the fashion milieu. I'm sure they exist, like, say, in the MLM milieu. There's all these little different subsystems. I'm sure they exist in the martial arts milieu. There's probably live streams that are going on where people are fighting each other. I know it goes on because I've done so much commentary previously about the Russ McCamey narrative. I mean, there's people commenting on comments on comments. Same thing with the Carol Baskin phenomenon. That one really cracks me up, that they got a guy who's pretending to be a private detective. He's going to expose that she killed her husband or something. I mean, and that still is using live streaming and things like that. Or he just uses tapes, this guy. I won't mention his name. But there's a lot of anger, criticism, hostility that gets brought out on YouTube. And since I'm a human being just like anybody else, it gratifies some crazy need in me to watch all this hostility being dumped on each other, but there's human lives at the bottom of it. That's what I said about Netflix and Tiger King, and I'm going to say it again about this genre of live streaming. People's lives are at stake. I mean, things go on where people are doxxed. I'm sure you know what that means. They're swatted. They got SWAT teams coming to their house, pizzas ordered. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. And this runs through, really, I think, the fabric of YouTube, especially with live streaming, but not only limited to it. Like I said, I don't care if I talk about the Onisian and Repsian phenomenon. They draw so much attention to themselves that I don't mind saying that. But these people operate more like in a little corner of YouTube, and it's usually connected with like other forms of social media, like private meetings on the Discord and stuff like that prepare, for the next live stream that they're going to do, or like they'll live stream while somebody else is live streaming to try to take I was going to say patients. That's funny. To try to take, I was going to say clients, to try to take viewers, away from each other. But it gets real hostile, and restraining orders and especially swatting. That's a big one. I saw one the other day that was really in terrible taste, and it involved somebody's daughter who was part of this crazy milieu, and something really gross. I'm not even going to talk about it, but it was really bad. And so there is this like armpit of YouTube, and like I said, as entertaining as it is, it's kind of disturbing. I'm not sure why. I suppose you could say, well, you don't have to watch it if you don't want. But I think that it's like a receptacle, a vehicle for people that perhaps have a lot of anger inside, that want to like start these wars with each other. Well, it's one thing if you want to use social media to have like a reality Hatfield and McCoy's thing. I mean, that's cool. I don't care about that. But when you start doing things like doxing, and there's a tremendous, there's one thing, if you look at cognitive psychology and the whole notion of thinking errors or cognitive distortions, ways that people talk themselves into doing things that aren't right, or not in their best interest. One of the great ones you see on these kind of shows are, well, since you did this, that gives me the right to do this. To do that, or since you did that, it gives me the right to do this. There's that old rule, sticks or don't. Well, I don't know what the expression is, but there's that distortion. But you see, that only exists for a nanosecond of time. In other words, if somebody does something you don't like, well, first of all, it's your perception as to what kind of response you want to give. Is it equal to the crime or not? And usually it's a little more than the crime, right? So then that person responds back to you, and before you know it, the content of what you're fighting over has nothing to do with the process of the fighting, because it's really the fighting that's taking precedence over whatever issue there was between the people. And that's, I think, more primitive. It's venting emotions that really probably aren't even the object of the people that they're fighting against. So they also Oh, see, the thing I think that ties this whole phenomena together, and I wish I could think of a better word, so I had a word, but I'm scared. I don't want someone to start messing with my channel, and it's an earnest concern. It's not like I'm being histrionic or anything like that. I really am. I've seen what these folks do, and keep it in your own home. But I do think it's destructive. I think it's a power-based thing. If you look at the heads of all these little cults, they're almost like little cults, actually. If you look at the heads of these things, they're all looking for power. That's what it's really about. Who's the king of the hill? Who can be the most outrageous? Who can dox someone the worst? But the unfortunate thing is nobody takes any responsibility for their own actions. It's always because you did this, I get the right to do that. If that was the case, could you imagine what would be going on in this world right now? If everybody just acted on that, I'm sure you could feel that way. I feel that way. Like I'm a little pissed with a certain section of the world at this particular moment. But, I'm not running out and shooting people, But, in this instance, there's just all kinds of really, I could get real clinical about it, but I don't want to. I just think that I think it's concerning. I think it's kind of a misuse of social media because it involves all this stuff like taking someone's identity and posting it, or taking their screenshots from their discussion they had with someone else and posting it. Or there's another big technique they use, I've noticed, which is somebody makes a video, then they take the video and on a live stream they put the video on their screen and then stop it like every let's say 15 seconds, and then say, what an idiot, how can he say that? And then they just give their side of the story and then let it play for about 2 more seconds, then stop it and say, Jesus, what, is your penis too small? I mean, it gets worse than that. But what point am I trying to make? I don't know. I think I'm just making an observation that on YouTube, everybody criticizes YouTube because their money's getting taken away. I understand that if you make your living on YouTube, but that's the kind of stuff you hear. But there is this society inside YouTube, and like I said, it starts earlier. It starts in these more legitimate, so-called legitimate forms, like I said, like Onision and Repsian. But it spreads, and I think that goes back to the reason it spreads and it gets so big is because of what everybody has always said about the downside of social media, and that is that it's anonymous. It's anonymous. You're talking to somebody 50 million miles away sometimes, other countries you're talking to people from. I'll bet you that shit would not go on if, you had to square off in a parking lot and air your views. I'd like to see, these tough guys, who say, well, you did this, so I can do that. Yeah, let's see you get into an octagon together and see what happens. It's a receptacle for people to act out whatever emotional issues they have. And back to YouTube, the only thing that I would say about that is, do you want your platform? Is that freedom of speech, or is that abuse of the freedom of speech? That's for lawyers, I guess, to decide. But I'd say because it involves human lives and it involves, police being called, or a big one they also are into doing is calling protective service on other people. Child protective service. Like protective services doesn't have enough on their hands, let alone to go out on some bogus call. They don't have enough on their hands. They got to deal. You'll talk about a terrible, not terrible, but an unfortunate section, a subsystem of society. Boy, those folks got to go to the worst situations. I had a graduate student I supervised one time who was doing a home visit, and it wasn't even her client, but a lady in a ghetto apartment building dangled a baby over the banister of a 3-story apartment because she was pissed at her lover. I mean, that kind of shit goes on, and that's what CPS does for a living, is try to save that baby from being dropped, not chasing after calls because you're pissed at somebody because they didn't like something that you had a feeling about. And I'm being very vague, okay? So anyway, that's about it. I may do more on this. I hope this hasn't been too vague. It's just been out of self-protection. if any of you know what I'm talking about, I think you can understand why it would be that way. Oh, but one other thing too, YouTube might. Oh, I said it. YouTube might want to take a look at, is this really freedom of speech, or is this like, abuse of the freedom of speech? Is it just a platform to act out and hurt each other with, or is it a place to actually talk about meaningful things? I leave you with that. So thanks for listening. I'm scared as shit, but we'll see what happens. I don't know if I'm going to air this even. But thanks for listening, and it's been a pleasure being with you. Stay inside, be safe, and I love my 1 million viewers, and all you good live streamers, keep it up, because it's a very beautiful part of YouTube too. So with that, I bid you adieu, and thank you again for being with me. I always fuck this part up. I tell you, it's going to become my trademark. Thanks for being with me for another episode of Inside the World of Mack's Headroom. Whew. All right, take care. Get out of here now. Bye.